A lion cub frozen in the snow. What rescuers found next was heartbreaking. In the middle of a frozen winter storm, deep in the wilderness where no one expected to find life, rescuers stumbled upon a sight that left them speechless. A tiny lion cub, barely breathing, half buried under the snow. His fragile body trembled against the icy wind, his eyes clouded with fear and exhaustion. Everyone thought there was no chance of survival. But what they discovered when they pulled him from the snow would break their hearts and forever change their lives. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. This is not just a story about survival, it's about resilience, courage, and the unexpected bond between humans and one of the wild's most majestic creatures. Stay with us until the very end, because what happens to this cub will leave you reflecting on the power of compassion and the strength of life itself. The storm had raged all night. White winds howled across the mountains, blanketing everything in a suffocating silence broken only by the hiss of snow against trees. It was the kind of cold that seeped into bone and marrow, the kind of storm that left even seasoned rangers fearing what they might find when the skies finally cleared. In the early morning, a rescue team set out from the Montana Wildlife Rehabilitation Unit. They had been alerted by hikers who claimed to hear strange cries in the distance before the blizzard swallowed the trail. Most assumed it was a fox, or perhaps a coyote caught in the storm. But one voice on the call, a woman named Sarah Jennings, a veteran rescuer, heard something different. Something weaker, younger, and desperate. She convinced her team to follow the lead, even though the path was treacherous. The snow reached up to their knees, and the forest was a ghostly maze of fallen branches. "Stay sharp," Sarah called out, her voice muffled under her scarf. "If there's something alive out here, it doesn't have much time." Hours passed. The rescuers grew weary, their breath forming clouds that disappeared instantly into the frost. Doubt began to settle in. Perhaps the storm had already taken whatever creature had cried out in the night. Perhaps they were too late. And then they saw it. Half buried under a mound of snow, barely visible against the white, was a small shape. Sarah's heart jolted. At first she thought it was a dog, abandoned by careless hands. But as she knelt and brushed the snow away, her breath caught in her throat. It was a lion cub. No one spoke. For a long moment, the team simply stared in disbelief. A lion, here, in the freezing wilderness of Montana. Its golden fur was frosted with ice, its tiny chest rising and falling in shallow, painful breaths. Its eyes fluttered open just enough to reveal a dull amber glow, as if life itself was slipping away. Sarah tore off her gloves, ignoring the sting of the cold as she scooped the cub into her arms. The body was frighteningly light, far too thin for its age. She pressed it against her chest, trying to transfer warmth. "He's alive," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Barely, but he's alive." "How does a lion end up here?" one rescuer asked, disbelief clouding his words. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't know. All that mattered was that this cub had one final chance, and she refused to let it slip away. They wrapped the cub in blankets and hurried back toward the truck. Every second felt like a battle. The wind clawed at their faces, the snow fought to drag them down. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the cub, whispering encouragement into its fragile ears. "Hold on, little one. Just hold on." By the time they reached the truck, her arms were numb, but she didn't let go. The heater roared as they sped toward the rehabilitation center. Still, the cub's breathing was shallow, his body limp. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She had seen many animals broken by the cruelty of men or the brutality of nature, but something about this cub struck deeper. He was too young to carry scars, too innocent to be dying alone in the snow. When they arrived, the medical team rushed into action. They laid the cub on a heated table, threading 4 lines and monitoring his weak heartbeat. Sarah stood nearby, her fists clenched, praying silently. Every beep of the monitor felt like a verdict waiting to be passed. At last, Dr. Mason, the head veterinarian, looked up. His face was grave. "He's hypothermic. Severe malnutrition. Dehydrated. This cub has been suffering for a long time. We'll do everything we can, but..." His voice trailed off. Sarah finished the sentence in her mind. But he might not make it. She stepped forward and brushed a trembling hand over the cub's fur. Beneath the ice and dirt, she felt the faint rise and fall of breath. "He's a fighter," she said softly. "I can feel it." The team worked for hours. Warm fluids, careful feeding, oxygen support. Slowly, the cub's breathing steadied, though faintly. His eyes flickered open, catching Sarah's face. For a moment, their gazes locked. In those dull amber eyes, she saw not just weakness, but a fragile will to live. She smiled through her tears. "That's it. Stay with me." Night fell. The storm outside finally eased, leaving a calm stillness around the center. Inside, the cub lay wrapped in blankets, his small body surrounded by heat lamps. Sarah refused to leave his side. She whispered stories to him, as if her voice could anchor him to this world. She told him of the sanctuary, of the lions who had once been rescued from circuses and zoos, of how he too could find a new life. By midnight, his breathing had deepened. Not strong, not stable, but alive. Sarah leaned back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. She knew the battle was far from won. The cub's body carried scars of starvation, his future uncertain. But she also knew this. Against all odds, he had survived the snow. And if he had survived that, maybe, just maybe, he could survive everything else. Yet questions haunted her. Where had he come from? Why had no one reported a missing exotic animal? Had he escaped, or had someone left him there to die? She glanced at the cub, who twitched in his sleep, his paws curling as if chasing dreams. A chill ran through her, not from the cold, but from the fear that his story was darker than anyone realized. The storm had delivered him into their hands. But the storm, Sarah knew, was only the beginning. The snow had melted from the roads, but inside the wildlife center, the chill of uncertainty lingered. Days had passed since Sarah Jennings and her team had carried the half-frozen lion cub out of the storm, and though his breathing had steadied, his life remained a fragile thread. They called him Noah, after the Ark, a symbol of survival against impossible odds. It was Sarah's idea. "He was carried out of the storm like he was carried out of a flood," she said softly, stroking the cub's tiny paw. The name stuck, and soon everyone on the staff whispered it with quiet hope. Noah's condition was complicated. Malnutrition had left his ribs sharp against his skin, his fur patchy in places, and his energy nearly non-existent. Dr. Mason warned the team daily. "We're treating more than hypothermia. This cub has been suffering for months. Whoever had him before, if anyone at all, didn't feed him properly. His organs are weak. His immune system is fragile. We must prepare for the possibility." He didn't finish the sentence, but the silence was heavy with the word death. Sarah refused to accept it. She spent hours by Noah's side, speaking to him as if her words alone could heal. When she placed her hand gently over his chest, she could feel his faint heartbeat beneath the soft rise and fall of his ribs. Every pulse was a promise. The bond between them grew quickly. Noah's amber eyes, though dull from weakness, always searched for her. When Sarah entered the room, he tried, however feebly, to lift his head. She was his constant presence, his lifeline. And Sarah, who had seen countless rescues in her career, knew this one was different. She wasn't just saving a cub, he was saving something inside her too. But outside the center, a storm of a different kind brewed. Word of the lion cub had spread. Reporters camped outside the gates, eager for photographs and headlines. "Lion cub found in Montana snowstorm," blared across newspapers and television channels. Some hailed it as a miracle. Others asked harder questions. How did an African lion cub end up in the middle of the American wilderness? Authorities arrived within days. Sheriff Daniels, a tall man with weathered hands and a voice that carried suspicion, stepped into the rehabilitation center with 2 deputies. "We've had calls," he said flatly. "This cub may have come from an illegal exotic trade. If that's the case, it's evidence in a criminal investigation. You won't be able to keep him here forever." Sarah's stomach twisted. She had expected questions, but not this soon. "Sheriff, he's barely alive. If we move him now, he won't survive the stress." Daniel's expression softened just slightly, but his eyes remained firm. I'm not here to take him today. But understand, if he was abandoned because someone didn't want to get caught, they might come looking. And not everyone who comes will want to see him saved. The words haunted Sarah long after he left. That night, as she sat by Noah's side, she whispered, "You're safe here, I promise." Yet, deep inside, she wondered if she could keep that promise. Meanwhile, Noah's recovery faltered. Some days he managed to eat a little meat broth, licking Sarah's fingers with a fragile tongue. Other days he turned away from food, his body shivering despite the heat lamps. Each setback felt like a blow. One evening, after hours of coaxing him to eat, Sarah broke. She pressed her forehead gently to his, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Don't give up, Noah. Please. I can't lose you." As if hearing her plea, Noah gave a faint purr, a sound so weak it was almost a whisper, yet it vibrated against her skin like a promise. Sarah laughed through her tears. "That's it. Fight with me." The next morning brought a glimmer of hope. Noah managed to stand, his legs wobbling beneath him like thin twigs. He stumbled, nearly collapsing, but Sarah caught him, guiding him back onto the blanket. His eyes burned with determination. Dr. Mason watched carefully. "He's fighting harder than I thought he could. But be warned, recovery isn't a straight line. There will be more setbacks." And he was right. That very afternoon, Noah's breathing faltered again. The staff rushed to provide oxygen, and for a terrifying hour, they weren't sure if he would make it. Sarah never let go of his paw, whispering prayers and promises until his chest finally rose with steadier rhythm. The emotional roller coaster wore on everyone, but Sarah bore the heaviest weight. Still, she refused to step back. Noah needed her, and somewhere deep inside, she knew she needed him just as much. Yet the external conflict could not be ignored. The Wildlife Center's phone rang constantly with questions from the press. Protesters even appeared outside the gates, some demanding Noah be sent to a zoo, others arguing he should be released back into the wild, even though survival was impossible. Funding for the center, already scarce, began to dwindle as sponsors grew nervous about the controversy. At a staff meeting, Dr. Mason sighed heavily. "We're walking a thin line. If the state decides Noah's presence is a liability, they could shut us down." Sarah clenched her fists. "He's not a liability. He's a life. And I won't let them decide his fate like he's nothing." Mason looked at her, his expression weary but respectful. "Then be prepared to fight, Sarah. Because people will come for him. And not all of them with kindness." That night, she sat again beside Noah, watching his chest rise and fall in rhythm with the lamp's golden glow. Malik, the cub she once only imagined naming, had become Noah, a living testament to resilience. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that his story was larger than the storm that had nearly killed him. "Someone left you out there," she whispered, brushing a strand of fur from his forehead. "Someone wanted you gone. But you found us. And now, no matter what comes, you're not alone." Noah stirred, his small paw reaching weakly toward her hand. The gesture was simple, but it bound her heart completely. Yet as she drifted into uneasy sleep in the chair beside him, headlights flashed outside the center. A dark car lingered at the gate longer than necessary before pulling away into the night. Sarah didn't see it, but the storm that had delivered Noah into her life had also awakened enemies who would not rest until the cub was claimed. And as the snow melted into spring, the question loomed larger than ever: was Noah truly safe, or was his fight for survival only just beginning? The spring sun was returning to Montana, melting the last traces of the brutal storm that had almost claimed Noah's life. Streams trickled down the mountain paths, and wildflowers pushed through the thawing soil. Yet inside the rehabilitation center, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Noah was still alive, against every prediction, but his recovery came like the shifting weather, sudden bursts of strength followed by frightening collapses. One morning he surprised everyone by managing to walk across the room, his paws unsteady but determined. The staff clapped softly, cheering his progress. Sarah crouched low, arms open, and Noah stumbled toward her, collapsing into her lap with a weak purr that brought tears to her eyes. But that evening his progress turned to panic. He refused food, his body shivering again. Dr. Mason rushed in with oxygen, his expression grim. His lungs are fragile. He may have lasting damage from the cold. Sarah sat beside him all night, refusing to leave. She stroked his fur gently, whispering encouragement into his twitching ears. "You've come too far, little one. Don't stop now." Each shallow breath he drew tightened a knot of fear in her chest. By dawn, his condition stabilized, but Sarah was exhausted, her heart stretched thin. She knew now that saving Noah would not be a short battle. It was a war of inches, fought day by day. Yet the greatest threat was not only his body. One afternoon, while Sarah prepared formula in the kitchen, a knock echoed at the center's side door. A man stood outside, dressed in a dark jacket, his eyes sharp and unsettling. "You have a lion cub," he said bluntly when the staff member opened. The worker stiffened. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows where he belongs." His smile was thin, humorless. "That cub is worth more than your entire center. Hand him over, and you won't have trouble." The door slammed shut. But the fear remained. Sarah was called immediately, and when she heard the report, her stomach dropped. Illegal wildlife traders. She had suspected it from the beginning, that Noah wasn't lost but abandoned when the storm made him too weak to sell. Now her suspicion had a face, and it chilled her more than any winter storm. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat by Noah's pen, listening to his faint purrs as he slept under the warmth of a lamp. She traced her fingers along his small paw, whispering, "They won't take you. I don't care what it costs." The next morning, Sheriff Daniels returned after hearing of the incident. His jaw was tense, his words blunt. "They'll come back. People like that don't just walk away. And if they know where he is, they'll push harder." "Then we move him," Sarah said firmly. "To where?" the sheriff countered. "Sanctuaries are full, zoos are watching this case, and your center is barely keeping its funding as it is. If you move him without clearance, it could be illegal." Sarah's fists clenched. "So we do nothing and let them circle like vultures?" Daniels sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm saying you need to be smart. If you want to protect him, you can't just fight with your heart. You'll need a plan." A plan. The word stayed with Sarah all day as she juggled Noah's care with phone calls, press questions, and the endless tide of criticism. Half the world seemed to be rooting for Noah to survive. The other half saw him as a prize or a liability. Late that night, as the staff finally dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with Noah. He was stronger that day, eating a little more, even batting weakly at her hand with his paw. His amber eyes, once clouded, now burned brighter. "You don't even know the storm you've walked into, do you?" Sarah whispered. "All you want is to live. But to do that, I may have to give up everything." She thought of her career, her reputation, even the center itself. Already sponsors were pulling back, fearing scandal. If she fought harder to keep Noah, she might lose it all. But then Noah curled against her arm, pressing his fragile body into her warmth. The sound of his purr filled the quiet room. Sarah closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're worth it," she murmured. "Even if it costs me everything, you're worth it." The following days tested her resolve. Letters arrived, some filled with hope, others with threats. Protesters returned to the gates, waving signs. Funding continued to shrink. But the darkest moment came when the same dark car seen weeks before returned. This time it parked longer, headlights off, just beyond the tree line. Fear knifed through Sarah, but instead of retreating, she acted. She called the sheriff, but she also doubled security around Noah's pen, refusing to let him out of her sight. She even began sleeping on the floor beside him, wrapped in a blanket, her hand always within reach of his paw. Dr. Mason worried for her. "Sarah, you can't keep this up. You're burning yourself out." But she shook her head. "If I don't stand by him, who will?" Her devotion did not go unnoticed. The staff began to rally, volunteering extra shifts, standing guard at night. The cub who had once been abandoned now had an entire team protecting him, inspired by Sarah's unbreakable will. Still, the weight of sacrifice pressed heavier each day. Sarah missed her family dinners, ignored her personal life, and poured everything into Noah. Her friends worried. Some even told her she was obsessed. But when she looked at him, when she saw the cub who had been left to freeze, now fighting for every breath, she knew she couldn't stop. She had promised him survival. And Noah, in his own way, seemed to sense it. His strength grew in tiny increments. He played a little, walked farther, even climbed onto Sarah's lap with clumsy determination. Each small victory was a spark in the darkness, a reminder that he wasn't giving up. Yet the threats loomed closer. Late one evening, as Sarah wrote notes by lamplight, she found a piece of paper slipped under the center's back door. The message was short, written in jagged letters. "The cub belongs to us. Next time, we won't ask." Sarah's hand trembled as she read it. She looked over at Noah, asleep in his blankets, his chest rising and falling peacefully. A wave of fear surged through her, but alongside it, a wave of defiance. "They'll have to go through me first," she whispered. The storm that had nearly claimed Noah was over. But a new storm, one far more dangerous, was gathering. And as Sarah held Noah's paw in the stillness of the night, she realized something with absolute certainty. Protecting him might cost her everything she had ever known. But losing him would cost her even more. The spring thaw had transformed the wilderness around the Montana Wildlife Rehabilitation Unit into a world of rushing streams and budding green. But inside the center, unease spread like a shadow. The threat Sarah had feared was no longer whispers or headlights in the night. It was now undeniable. The note left under the door proved it. Someone wanted Noah, and they would not stop until they got him. Sarah carried the weight of that knowledge every moment. She could barely close her eyes without imagining dark figures breaking in, stealing the fragile cub she had fought to keep alive. Her nights were restless, spent lying on the floor beside Noah's pen, listening for every creak of the building. But Noah, oblivious to the dangers circling outside, was beginning to bloom. Each day, his strength grew. His once wobbly legs now carried him across the room with clumsy determination. His fur thickened, glowing golden again under the warmth of the lamps. Sometimes he would pounce at Sarah's shoes, his small growls playful, his amber eyes bright with mischief. For Sarah, those moments were salvation. Every purr, every paw against her hand, was proof that the cub she had found half buried in snow still wanted to live. And it was precisely that will to live that made him so precious, not only to her, but to those who saw him as prophet. Dr. Mason called another meeting with the staff. His face was drawn, his eyes weary. "We can't ignore the threats anymore. The sheriff's doing what he can, but we don't have the resources to fight criminals. If Noah stays here, he's in danger." The room fell into silence. One volunteer whispered, "Are you saying we should give him up?" "No," Mason said firmly. "I'm saying we may need to move him to a secure sanctuary. Somewhere out of reach." Sarah's heart clenched. He won't survive the move. He's still too weak. Uprooting him now could undo everything. Mason's gaze softened. "Sarah, I know what he means to you. But this is bigger than us. If we wait too long, those men might not just threaten, they might act." The argument echoed in Sarah's mind long after the meeting ended. She couldn't deny the danger. But the thought of separating from Noah, even for his safety, felt unbearable. That night, her fears became real. It was just after midnight when the sound of breaking glass shattered the stillness. Sarah bolted upright, her heart pounding. Noah stirred in his pen, startled by the noise. Two figures in dark clothing slipped through the back hallway, their footsteps quick and purposeful. Sarah grabbed the nearest object she could find, a heavy flashlight, and positioned herself between the intruders and Noah. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. The men froze for only a second before one sneered, "We don't want trouble, lady. Just the cub. You'll have to go through me first." The taller man stepped forward, his eyes cold. "Do you really think you can protect him? He's not yours. He's worth more than your entire life." Sarah's grip on the flashlight tightened, her body shaking with adrenaline. She wasn't strong, she wasn't armed, but she had something stronger than either. She had a promise. The promise she had whispered to Noah on the night she found him in the snow. Behind her, the cub let out a small, frightened growl. The sound, weak but defiant, gave Sarah courage she didn't know she had. "He's not your property," she snapped. "He's a life. And I won't let you take him." The standoff stretched, tense and silent. Then headlights flashed outside, flooding the room with beams of light. Sheriff Daniel's voice bellowed through a loudspeaker, "Step away from the building. Hands where I can see them." The intruders cursed under their breath, retreating toward the shattered door. Within seconds, they vanished into the night, leaving nothing but broken glass and the echo of danger behind them. Sheriff Daniel stormed in moments later, his face thunderous. "You could have been killed, Sarah. You should have called me the second you suspected something like this." Her hands still shook as she clutched Noah to her chest. "I wasn't going to let them take him." Daniel's voice softened. "I know. But this isn't sustainable. They'll be back and next time, you might not get lucky." The sheriff was right, but Sarah's heart rebelled against the truth. She pressed her face into Noah's fur, inhaling the faint warmth of his body. "I won't give him up," she whispered. But the events of the night forced the center into a decision. The staff debated for hours the following day. Some argued for immediate transfer. Others, led by Sarah, begged for more time. In the end, Dr. Mason set a deadline, 1 week. If Noah wasn't strong enough to travel by then, they'd move him anyway. Sarah felt her world collapse. 7 days. 7 days to make Noah strong enough, or risk losing him forever. She threw herself into his care with renewed determination. She spent every hour feeding him carefully, encouraging his wobbly steps, strengthening his tiny muscles with gentle play. She whispered to him constantly, telling him stories, urging him to fight harder. And Noah responded. It was as if he knew the urgency, as if he sensed the countdown ticking against them. He ate more. He moved more. He even managed a clumsy leap onto Sarah's lap, his purr stronger now, resonating like a heartbeat of hope. But each time she smiled at his progress, the shadow of loss loomed over her. The thought of placing him in another facility, of walking away from the bond they had forged in the storm, tore at her soul. On the 6th night, Sarah sat by his pen, her hand resting against his fur as he slept. The stars glittered through the window, and the silence of the wilderness pressed close. She whispered, "If I have to let you go, Noah, I want you to know, I'll never stop fighting for you. You're more than a cub. You're my miracle." Noah stirred, pressing his paw weakly against her hand as if answering her promise. The 7th day dawned bright and cold. The transport team was scheduled to arrive by afternoon. Sarah's chest ached with dread as she watched Noah play, pouncing on a toy with newfound energy. He was stronger, but was it enough? Dr. Mason approached gently. "Sarah, it's time." She swallowed hard, her heart in pieces. She knew this was the right decision for his safety, but it felt like betrayal. As the sound of the transport vehicle echoed up the gravel road, Sarah lifted Noah into her arms. His eyes met hers, amber and unwavering. He didn't know the storm awaiting them. He only knew the warmth of the human who had fought for him since the snow. And as Sarah held him close, she realized the cruelest truth of all. Sometimes love meant letting go. The transport van rumbled outside the wildlife center, its engine a low growl that seemed to echo the dread in Sarah's chest. The moment she had feared all week had arrived. Noah was to be transferred to a secure sanctuary, away from the eyes of poachers and traders. It was for his safety, she knew that, but every instinct screamed at her to hold on tighter. Inside the center, Noah sat in his pen, looking up at Sarah with those amber eyes that had once been clouded by weakness but now gleamed with fragile determination. He had grown stronger in the days leading up to this moment, but he was still far from healed. His paws were steadier, his appetite larger, his purr louder. Yet Sarah could not shake the fear that a long journey would undo all the progress they had fought for. Dr. Mason entered quietly, his face lined with fatigue. "They're here," he said softly. "The team is professional, Sarah. They'll keep him safe." She nodded, though her throat tightened with every word she tried not to say. She bent down, reaching into the pen. Noah pressed his head into her hand, purring faintly, as if sensing her unease. She whispered, "You're stronger than they think. You'll survive this, Noah. Just like you survived the snow. When the transport team stepped in with their crate, Sarah's chest clenched. They lined it with soft blankets and warm bottles, but it still looked like a cage. As they lifted Noah gently, he whimpered, pawing toward Sarah. She stepped forward instinctively, tears welling, but Dr. Mason placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Trust him. Trust what you've given him. They carried Noah to the van, Sarah following until the very last second. The door shut with a final thud, and the vehicle rolled down the gravel path, disappearing into the pines. For the first time in weeks, the center felt empty. Sarah stood in the quiet, her arms aching as though she had lost part of herself. She sat in Noah's now empty pen, her hands pressed against the blanket he had once slept on. Every sound in the building seemed too loud, every silence too heavy. Hours later, the phone rang. It was the sanctuary director. Sarah's heart nearly stopped as she answered. He made it, the voice said warmly. The trip was rough, but he's here. Weak but safe. Our vets are already working with him. Relief washed over her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She pressed the phone to her chest, tears streaming freely. He had survived. Against every odd, against the storm, against hunger, against men who saw him as nothing but money, Noah had survived again. Weeks turned to months. Sarah visited whenever she could, and each time, Noah greeted her with brighter eyes, steadier paws, and a purr that rumbled louder than before. He played now, leaping clumsily at toys, tumbling in the grass. The sanctuary's wide enclosures gave him space to grow, and though Sarah longed to keep him close, she knew this was where he belonged. One afternoon, as she watched him chase a butterfly through the tall grass, she realized something profound. The night she had found him, frozen in the snow, she thought she was saving him. But the truth was, Noah had saved her too. He had reminded her of why she had chosen this life, why she endured the endless battles of underfunding, criticism, and exhaustion. He had reminded her that every life, no matter how small or fragile, was worth fighting for. When she knelt by the fence, Noah bounded toward her, pressing his head against the wire. Sarah smiled, brushing her fingers over his fur. "You're not the frozen cub I found anymore," she whispered. "You're proof that even in the harshest storms, life can find a way." Behind her, Dr. Mason joined quietly. "You did more than save him, Sarah. You gave him a future." She turned, her eyes wet but shining. "We both did. And maybe, just maybe, he gave us one too." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Sarah stood, watching Noah play one last time before leaving. Her heart still ached, but it was no longer the ache of loss. It was the ache of love, of hope, of knowing she had been part of something greater than herself. And as she walked away, she whispered to the wind, a promise carried into the fading light, "You'll never be alone again." The story of Noah, the lion cub found frozen in the snow, spread far beyond Montana. It became more than a headline. It became a lesson. A reminder that resilience can rise from the harshest storms, that compassion can defy cruelty, and that courage is often found in the quiet determination of those who refuse to give up. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who loves inspiring stories and help us spread messages of courage and hope. Because in every battle for life, no matter how small, there is a chance to change the world.